Was she wrong to raise a mop at a rich woman, or right to finally defend her dignity? This is the moment the billionaire smiled, for the first time in his life. Like plus subscribe if this moment gave you chills. They said Harry Worth had never smiled, not as a baby cradled in silk sheets, not as a boy surrounded by tutors and trophies, not as a man standing atop a fortune so vast it bent markets and governments alike. At 28, Harry Worth was the youngest billionaire CEO in America, the Iron Core Worth Dominion Group, a corporate colossus with fingers in finance, real estate, energy, and technology. His name alone could send stock prices soaring or collapsing within minutes. Politicians requested meetings like favors. Wall Street analysts spoke of him in reverent tones. Competitors studied him the way generals studied an enemy they could never fully understand. But beneath the power, the prestige, and the perfectly tailored suits, there was something unsettlingly absent: warmth. The first time the media noticed, Harry was 5 years old. Cameras flashed as he stood beside his father at a charity gala. A tiny boy in an expensive tuxedo, eyes dark and still. Children his age fidgeted, smiled, laughed. Harry didn't. He simply stood there, posture straight, gaze distant, as if already carrying a weight no child should bear. By 10, the whispers began. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't cry. He doesn't react. Doctors were summoned. Specialists flew in from Europe. Psychologists tested him with ink blots, puzzles, emotional stimuli. The verdict was always the same: perfectly healthy, perfectly intelligent, emotionally unreachable. His father, William Worth, a ruthless titan himself, dismissed concern with a wave of his hand. He's focused, he said. The world rewards that. And the world did. Harry skipped grades, devoured books, dismantled complex systems before his teachers finished explaining them. At 16, he was already advising Worth Dominion's board on risk modeling. At 21, he engineered a hostile acquisition that stunned Wall Street. At 25, after his father's sudden death, he became CEO. At 28, he became a legend. The media crowned him the man without warmth. Headlines dissected his silence. Why has billionaire Harry Worth never smiled? Is the world's youngest CEO emotionally broken or evolutionarily advanced? Inside the mind of the coldest man in corporate America. Late-night hosts joked about it. Analysts speculated. Psychologists wrote think pieces. None of it mattered to Harry. He never responded. He never denied it. He never smiled. Inside Worth Dominion's headquarters, a 40-story monument of glass and steel rising above the city, his presence was felt like a shift in air pressure. Executives lowered their voices when he entered a room. Assistants straightened their posture. Board members, men and women worth hundreds of millions themselves, felt their pulse quicken under his gaze. Harry spoke rarely. When he did, his words were precise, economical, devastating. Revise the projection. Cut the division. Proceed. Careers were made or erased in 3 sentences or less. There were rumors, of course. Always rumors. Some said Harry had been born incapable of feeling. Others claimed something terrible had happened in childhood, something buried so deep it froze him from the inside out. That a few whispered darker theories, that he felt everything too deeply and silence was his armor. Employees swapped stories in hushed corners of the building. I heard he fired a senior VP for blinking too much during a presentation. My cousin's friend says he once sat through a 3-hour crisis meeting without moving a muscle. They say he watches people, not numbers. No one knew what was true. What everyone knew was this: you did not cross Harry Worth. And you did not expect kindness from him. On the 42nd floor, the boardroom lights were already on long before sunrise. Harry stood alone at the window, hands clasped behind his back, city lights blinking like distant stars beneath him. He hadn't slept. He rarely did. Sleep was inefficient. Behind him, a digital wall scrolled data, global markets, overnight trades, geopolitical alerts. His mind absorbed it all effortlessly. Patterns, risks, opportunities. Yet even as the world bent itself into equations he could solve, there was a quiet, nagging emptiness he never named. Not loneliness, not sadness, just Absence. A knock sounded at the door. The board filed in careful, respectful, tense. They took their seats, eyes flicking at Harry, then away. The meeting began. Quarterly performance, expansion strategy, regulatory threats. Harry listened, expression unreadable. When the presentation ended, silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. "We proceed with the acquisition," he said calmly. "Cut redundancies. Secure political backing." No one argued. No one ever did. When the meeting adjourned, relief rippled through the room. Another decision survived. Another day without displeasing him. As the executives filtered out, one of them murmured under his breath, "It's like standing in front of a glacier." Harry heard it. He always did. But he didn't react. Down below, in the vast marble lobby of Worth Dominion, the building was just beginning to wake. Security guards changed shifts. Lights flickered on floor by floor. Cleaning crews moved quietly, pushing carts, wiping surfaces until they gleamed. And that was when Hannah Max arrived. It was still dark outside when she stepped through the revolving doors, clutching her worn backpack close to her chest. She paused for half a second, taking in the enormity of the space. The soaring ceilings, the polished floors that reflected the lights like water, the silence that felt heavy and expensive. Hannah was 20 years old. She wore simple clothes, practical shoes, hair pulled back neatly. Nothing about her announced ambition or importance. She blended into the background the way people like her often did. She scanned her badge, nodded politely to security, and headed toward the service elevators. No one noticed her. That was normal. Hannah worked 2 jobs and attended classes at night. At Worth Dominion, she was classified as intern, though her tasks leaned heavily toward janitorial and administrative support. She cleaned executive floors before meetings, delivered documents, restocked conference rooms. She moved carefully, efficiently, silently. But Hannah observed everything. She noticed how people stiffened when Harry Worth passed by, how conversations died mid-sentence, how even the confident ones avoided eye contact. She'd seen him once before, from a distance, tall, immaculate, untouchable. She didn't know his story, only his reputation. And she had no idea, none at all, that her arrival that morning marked the beginning of the end of a legend. Above her, on the 42nd floor, Harry Worth turned from the window. For the first time in a long while, something invisible was shifting in the foundation of his world. But neither of them knew it yet. The man without warmth continued forward, unaware that the quiet intern moving through his empire would soon ask a question no one else ever dared to answer. What could possibly move a man like this? Do you think some people are born emotionally cold, or made that way? Comment your thoughts below. Hannah Max learned early that the world rarely paused for people like her. At 5:30 every morning, before the sun even considered rising, Hannah was already awake. Her alarm never needed to ring twice. She rolled out of bed quietly in the small apartment she shared with her aunt, careful not to wake anyone, and moved through her routine with practiced efficiency. Cold water on her face, hair pulled back, simple clothes laid out the night before. Discipline wasn't something Hannah talked about. It was something she lived. By 6:15, she was out the door, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, not for music, but for recorded lectures she replayed while commuting. Time to Hannah was a resource too precious to waste. Her first job started before most people finished dreaming. At Worth Dominion Group, Hannah was officially an intern. Unofficially, she was whatever the building needed her to be. She cleaned executive floors before meetings, organized files no one else wanted to touch, refilled coffee machines, and delivered documents between departments. She was invisible by design. Invisible interns didn't get blamed. Invisible interns didn't get noticed. Invisible interns survived. By mid-morning, while executives argued over numbers that dwarfed her lifetime earnings, Hannah's mind quietly absorbed patterns. She noticed which assistants controlled access to power, which board members smiled too much, which executives spoke loudly to hide uncertainty. Corporate politics fascinated her, not because she wanted to play the game, but because she wanted to understand it. At noon, while others ordered catered lunches, Hannah slipped outside with a packed meal. Rice, vegetables, protein when she could afford it. She ate while reviewing notes for her evening classes, economics, finance, data systems. Education was her second job after Worth Dominion. She worked nights at a small tutoring center, helping high school students grasp concepts their schools failed to teach them. The pay wasn't great, but it was consistent. And consistency meant survival. By the time she returned home each night, exhaustion pressed heavy against her bones. But Hannah never complained. Complaining didn't pay rent. What she didn't tell anyone, not her co-workers, not her classmates, was how often she calculated numbers in her head. Budgets, projections, risk margins. She did it instinctively, the way some people hummed without realizing it. It was simply how her mind worked. At Worth Dominion, no one noticed, except one man. The morning it happened, Hannah was moving faster than usual. A board meeting had been scheduled earlier than expected, and the executive floor needed to be spotless. She exited the service elevator with a stack of documents balanced carefully in her arms. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. She adjusted her grip, took 2 steps forward, and felt it slip. Her access badge slid free, clattering softly against the marble floor. Hannah froze. Badges were important. Losing one meant paperwork. Questions. Attention. She bent down quickly to retrieve it, and stopped. A pair of polished black shoes stood inches from her hand. Her gaze traveled upward slowly, following the sharp line of tailored trousers, the flawless cut of a dark suit, the stillness of a man who seemed carved rather than dressed. Harry Worth. Time seemed to stall. Hannah straightened instinctively, heart pounding. She'd seen him from afar before, but never this close. His presence felt dense, like standing near something powerful and contained. Before she could speak, Harry bent down. The movement was so unexpected she almost forgot to breathe. He picked up the badge, glanced briefly at the name, Hannah Max, and handed it to her. Their fingers didn't touch. His eyes met hers for half a second. Dark, unreadable, sharp. Then he stepped past her and continued down the hallway, footsteps echoing softly. No smile, no words. Just a pause. Hannah stood there longer than she meant to, badge clutched in her hand, pulse racing. She wasn't sure why the moment unsettled her so deeply. It shouldn't have mattered. And yet, from the far end of the hallway, someone else had been watching. Jennifer Wolfe slowed her pace deliberately, manicured nails tightening around her designer handbag. She had seen the pause, seen Harry Worth stop for someone else, for an intern, for a girl dressed plainly, hair pulled back, carrying documents like she belonged to the walls instead of the room. Jennifer's smile stiffened. She had spent months perfecting her proximity to Harry, appearing at the right events, timing her conversations, making sure he noticed her presence even if he never acknowledged it. She believed patience was her weapon, but patience had limits. Jennifer approached Hannah later that day, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "You should be more careful," she said lightly, though her eyes were anything but kind. "Badges can get lost." Hannah nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." Jennifer studied her, head tilted slightly, as if examining something insignificant but curious. "What's your role here?" Jennifer asked. "Intern," Hannah replied simply. Jennifer smiled, a thin, satisfied curve. "Of course." She walked away without another word. But something had shifted that evening. As Hannah wiped down a conference table, she noticed Jennifer watching a reflection in the glass wall. The look wasn't open hostility yet. It was assessment, calculation. Jennifer Wolfe did not lose battles she believed were already hers. Over the next few days, Hannah felt it. The stares, the whispers, the subtle changes in tone when Jennifer was nearby. Hannah didn't confront it. She didn't complain. She focused on her work, on her studies, on surviving another week. But Jennifer was paying close attention now. She noticed how Hannah moved quietly but confidently through spaces she didn't belong. How she listened more than she spoke. How she never looked intimidated. Most of all, Jennifer noticed something that unsettled her deeply. Harry Worth never paused for anyone, except Hannah Max. And for the first time since setting foot inside Word Dominion, Jennifer Wolfs felt something dangerous coil in her chest. Jealousy, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that ignites wars. As Hannah stepped into the service elevator at the end of her shift, unaware of the storm gathering behind her, one truth settled into place. She was no longer invisible, and that made her a target. Have you ever been underestimated like Hannah? Drop a yes if you relate. Jennifer Wolfs had always believed the world came in tiers. There were people who belonged at the top, polished, connected, wealthy, and there were people who existed to serve them. Jennifer had been raised to recognize the difference. At 23, she was already a fixture in elite circles. Her family name opened doors. Her appearance kept them open. She moved through charity galas, private lounges, and exclusive boardrooms like she owned the air itself. Every smile was calculated. Every laugh was practiced. Every gesture said the same thing. I belong here. And in Jennifer's mind, Harry Worth belonged with her. She told herself it was destiny. They were the same kind of people, born into privilege, raised among power, molded for dominance. She ignored the obvious truth. Harry had never shown interest, not in her, not in anyone. But Jennifer had patience. Or so she believed. She adjusted her schedule to match his, appeared at events he attended, donated to charities he supported, positioned herself just close enough to be noticed, but not enough to be dismissed. She played the long game, until Hannah Max entered the picture. At first, Jennifer barely registered her. Just another intern, another background figure, another body moving through Worth Dominion's halls without leaving a mark. Then she saw the pause. Harry Worth stopping, even briefly, for someone else was unthinkable. That pause lodged itself in Jennifer's mind like a splinter she couldn't remove. She began to watch Hannah. Closely, Jennifer noticed how Hannah carried herself. Quiet but not timid. How she didn't shrink when spoken to. How she listened, absorbed, and moved on. There was no desperation in her movements. No hunger for attention. That unsettled Jennifer more than outright ambition ever could. In Jennifer's world, people without power were either loud or invisible. Hannah was neither. Jennifer's smile became sharper, her tone cooler. She started asking questions, subtle ones at first. Who's that intern? Which department is she from? Why is she on the executive floor so often? The answers irritated her. She's efficient. She's quiet. She does her job. Nothing about Hannah explained Harry's pause. And so Jennifer filled the gaps with suspicion. By the end of the week, Jennifer had convinced herself of something dangerous. Hannah Max was a threat, not because she wanted Harry, but because Harry had noticed her, and that was unforgivable. Jennifer's first move was social. She began speaking just loudly enough for Hannah to hear. "Oh, interns these days," she said one afternoon near the elevators, voice dripping with amusement. They mistake proximity for importance. Laughter followed, polite, uncomfortable laughter from people who didn't want to be on the wrong side of Jennifer Wolfs. Hannah kept her eyes down and continued mopping the floor. Jennifer escalated. She accidentally bumped into Hannah, knocking papers from her hands. She commented on Hannah's clothes, her hair, her shoes, always framed as concern. "You should try something more professional," she said once, glancing pointedly at Hannah's simple blouse. "Appearances matter here." Hannah nodded calmly. "Thank you for the advice." The lack of reaction frustrated Jennifer. She wanted tears, fear, apologies. Instead, Hannah gave her silence. And silence, to someone like Jennifer, felt like disrespect. Soon, the humiliation became public. Jennifer timed her remarks for crowded spaces, conference corridors, the lobby, the executive floor where eyes were always watching. "Isn't it sweet," Jennifer remarked one morning, gesturing vaguely toward Hannah, "how some people think hard work alone can bridge gaps." Her eyes flicked briefly to Hannah's skin, then away. The words were wrapped in politeness, but the meaning landed heavy. Hannah felt it. So did everyone else. The room grew tense. Some looked away. Others pretended not to hear. No one intervened. Hannah continued working. But inside, pressure mounted. She felt it in the tightening of her chest, in the way her jaw clenched when Jennifer spoke, in the calculation she did every night, weighing whether enduring this was worth the paycheck. She reminded herself why she was there. Focus, endurance, survival. Jennifer mistook that calm for weakness. She began spreading whispers. She's too comfortable around executives. She's always on the executive floor. Do you think she's trying to get noticed? The implications were clear and ugly. Hannah heard the whispers but refused to respond. She had learned long ago that reacting gave people like Jennifer exactly what they wanted. Still, the weight of it followed her everywhere. One afternoon, as Hannah refilled a coffee station near a glass wall meeting room, she felt eyes on her again. Jennifer stood nearby, phone in hand, watching Hannah through the reflection. You know, Jennifer said casually, some people don't realize how easy they can cross lines. Hannah straightened slowly. I'm just doing my job. Jennifer smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course you are. She leaned in slightly. Just be careful which spaces you think you belong in. The words lingered, heavy with meaning. Hannah met Jennifer's gaze, steady, unflinching. I know exactly where I belong, she said quietly. For a split second, Jennifer's mask cracked. Then it hardened. That night, Jennifer made a decision. If Hannah wouldn't remove herself, Jennifer would do it for her. She began planning something bigger. Public, final, a moment that would put Hannah back in her place and remind everyone who held power and who never would. Jennifer had resources, influence, an audience, and soon she would have a stage. As Hannah finished her shift and stepped into the elevator, unaware of what was being set in motion, Jennifer stood alone in the lobby, staring at her reflection in the polished marble. Her jaw tightened. This is my world, she whispered to herself. And I don't lose. The elevator doors closed. Above them, unseen and unmoved, the machinery of Worth Dominion continued humming, unaware that a quiet intern and a desperate socialite were on a collision course that would soon erupt in full view of everyone. The war had been declared, and the battlefield was about to become very public. Do you think Jennifer is confident or desperate? Subscribe to see how this explodes. The Worth Dominion lobby was designed to intimidate. 40-foot glass walls rose like frozen waves. Marble floors reflected light. So perfectly, they looked unreal. Every step echoed, not loudly, but clearly, reminding anyone who walked through that this was a place where power lived and breathed. On that morning, the building was unusually full. Executives gathered in clusters, murmuring about an unscheduled board appearance. Assistants hurried across the lobby with tablets and folders. Security stood straighter than usual. And standing near the center of it all, dressed in flawless white and gold, was Jennifer Wolfs. She had chosen the timing carefully. Jennifer always did. Hannah Max entered the lobby pushing a cleaning cart, her movements smooth and practiced. She had already been working for hours. Her arms ached slightly, but her face was calm, unreadable. She focused on the floor ahead of her, the rhythm of her work steady. She didn't notice Jennifer step into her path until it was too late. "Oh, careful," Jennifer said sweetly, holding a steaming cup of coffee just inches from Hannah's uniform. Several heads turned. Hannah stopped. "Excuse me," she said politely, adjusting her cart to go around. Jennifer didn't move. Instead, she smiled and took a deliberate step forward. The coffee tipped. Dark liquid splashed across the marble floor, spreading fast, dangerously close to Jennifer's own designer heels. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the lobby. "Oh, no," Jennifer gasped, her voice rising just enough to carry. "Look what you made me do." Hannah froze. "I didn't touch you," she said calmly. Jennifer looked around, eyes wide, already performing. "You rushed me. This is a safety hazard." Executives slowed their steps. Assistants stopped pretending not to watch. Security glanced over but didn't intervene. Jennifer sighed dramatically and gestured at the spreading mess. "Well, aren't you going to clean it up?" The words landed hard. Hannah felt every eye on her. She felt the familiar pressure, the expectation that she would lower her head, apologize, kneel, She reached for the mop on her cart, but this time she didn't kneel. She stood upright, gripping the handle firmly, and looked Jennifer in the eye. The air shifted. Jennifer's smile faltered just slightly. "Hurry up," Jennifer added, her tone sharpening. "People are watching." Hannah took one slow step forward. The mop angled diagonally across her body, not threatening, but unmistakably present. Her voice was calm, controlled. "Move," Hannah said, "or you'll explain to security why you slipped." For half a second, the lobby went completely silent. Jennifer blinked. She hadn't expected that. She laughed nervously. "Are you threatening me?" Hannah didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. "I'm warning you," she said evenly. Jennifer's confidence cracked. She took a step back. Too fast. Her heels slid. There was a sharp gasp as Jennifer's arms flailed. She stumbled, nearly losing her balance, and let out a startled scream that echoed against the glass walls. Security surged forward instinctively. Jennifer caught herself at the last second, clutching her chest dramatically, eyes wide with shock and fury. "How dare you?" she shouted, voice trembling. "Did you see that? She attacked me." Hannah lowered the mop slowly and stepped back, hands visible. "I didn't touch you," she said. The truth hung heavy in the air. Everyone had seen it. Whispers erupted. She didn't even move. Jennifer stepped back herself. That in turn stood her ground. And then, without warning, the lobby fell silent again. The elevators at the far end opened. Harry Worth stepped out. He wore a dark suit, perfectly fitted, his expression as unreadable as ever. His presence alone altered the temperature of the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. People straightened instinctively. Harry took in the scene with a single glance. The spilled coffee, the mop in Hannah's hands, and Jennifer's theatrical distress. The frozen crowd. His eyes paused on Hannah. Just for a moment, she met his gaze without fear. Jennifer turned quickly, relief flashing across her face. "Harry, thank God you're here." She threatened me." Harry said nothing. He looked at Jennifer, then at the floor, then back at Hannah. Seconds stretched. No one breathed. Finally, Harry spoke, his voice low, even. "What happened?" Jennifer rushed to answer. "She caused me to spill my coffee and then raised that." She gestured wildly. "That mop at me." Harry's gaze never left Hannah. Hannah spoke quietly. "I asked her to move so I could clean the spill." Silence again. Harry nodded once. "Proceed," he said. He turned and walked away. That was it. No reprimand, and no accusation, and no comfort. The message was unmistakable. Jennifer stood stunned, humiliation burning through her chest. Eyes that once deferred to her now watched with thinly veiled judgment. Security cleared the area. Executives dispersed, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Hannah cleaned the spill with steady hands. But the damage had already been done. Within minutes, rumors ignited across the building. She threatened Jennifer Wolfs. She pulled a mop on her. She's finished. No intern survives that. By lunchtime, the story had evolved into something uglier. By evening, it had reached HR. Hannah felt it in the way people avoided her, in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, in the sympathetic glances from those who had seen the truth but lacked the courage to say it aloud. She finished her shift without complaint. As she exited the building, the city lights blurred slightly, not from tears, but from exhaustion. Above her, in the executive offices, Harry Worth stood alone once more at the window. He replayed the scene in his mind. Not Jennifer's scream, not the coffee, but the way Hannah had stood, unbowed, unapologetic, unafraid. Something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. By the next morning, the verdict would come, and everyone in Worth Dominion believed they already knew it. The intern who raised a mop at a socialite was finished. They just didn't know how wrong they were. Was Hannah right or wrong? Comment right or wrong below. By the next morning, the verdict had already been written, at least in the minds of everyone at Worth Dominion. Hannah Max felt it the moment she stepped through the revolving doors. The air was different. Conversations cut short when she passed. Eyes followed her movements. some filled with pity, others with curiosity thinly veiled as concern. Even the security guard, who usually nodded at her, avoided eye contact. The story had grown overnight. She threatened Jennifer Wolf's. She embarrassed the company. She crossed a line. No one said it outright, but the conclusion hung heavy in every whisper. She's done. Hannah kept her head high as she moved through the lobby, though her chest felt tight. She told herself to breathe, to focus, to stay present. She had survived worse. Still, when the email arrived, HR request, immediate meeting, her fingers paused over her phone for just a second. So this is it, she thought. She finished her task, parked her cart neatly where it belonged, and headed upstairs. The HR floor was quiet, almost too quiet. Neutral walls, soft lighting, the kind of place designed to feel calm while delivering consequences. As Hannah approached the conference room, she caught sight of Jennifer Wolf through the glass wall down the corridor. Jennifer was laughing, not quietly, not politely. She stood with two assistants, hand lifted dramatically as she spoke, her posture relaxed, triumphant. Her eyes flicked toward Hannah briefly, and her smile sharpened. Jennifer mouthed a single word. Bye. Hannah looked away and entered the conference room. Inside, 3 people waited. The HR director, a legal consultant, and a senior operations manager. Their expressions were carefully neutral. Hannah Max, the HR director, said, gesturing toward a chair, "Please have a seat." Hannah sat. The door closed softly behind her. "We need to discuss yesterday's incident." The HR director began. "There have been concerns raised." Hannah nodded. "I understand." The consultant shuffled papers. "Multiple reports claim you acted aggressively toward Ms. Wolf's." "I didn't touch her," Hannah said evenly. "There were witnesses." The operations manager cleared his throat. "Regardless, perception matters, especially at this level." Hannah absorbed the words without reacting. She had heard variations of them her entire life. Perception matters more than truth. Outside the room, Jennifer checked a reflection in her phone camera and smoothed her hair. She was already planning her next brunch, the next gala, the next story she would tell about how some people didn't know their place. She had won, or so she thought. Back inside the conference room, the HR director folded her hands. "Given the sensitivity of the situation, we're reviewing your position here." Hannah waited. Seconds passed. Then, the door opened. Every head in the room turned. Harry Worth stepped inside. No announcement. No entourage. Just him. The temperature seemed to drop instantly. The HR director stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Mr. Worth, we weren't expecting—" "Continue," Harry said calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table. No one argued. Hannah felt her pulse quicken, but her expression remained composed. Harry glanced briefly at the file in front of him. Then he looked at Hannah. "Tell me what happened," he said. Hannah met his gaze. "Ms. Wolf's blocked my path. She spilled her coffee. I asked her to move so I could clean it. That's all." Harry asked. "Yes." Harry turned to the others. "Anyone here witness physical contact?" Silence. The legal consultant shook his head slowly. "No, sir." Harry nodded once. He stood. "For clarity," he said evenly, "Hannah Max is not being terminated." The words landed like a shockwave. The HR director blinked. "Sir." "She is being reassigned," Harry continued. "Effective immediately." "Reassigned." Hannah's breath caught despite herself. Harry looked directly at her. "You'll report to my office." "Directly?" The room froze. The operations manager's mouth opened slightly, then closed. The legal consultant stared at the table. Hannah felt the weight of the moment settle over her, but she didn't speak. Harry turned toward the door. "Send her credentials to executive access." And just like that, he left. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the HR director exhaled sharply. "You're dismissed, Hannah." Hannah stood. "Thank you." She walked out of the room on steady legs, even as her mind raced. Direct executive intern. No one had seen that coming. Down the corridor, Jennifer Wolves was still laughing until she saw Hannah emerge. Alone, upright, not crying. Jennifer's smile faltered. She took a step forward. "What happened?" she asked sharply. Hannah stopped. "I wasn't fired," she said calmly. Jennifer scoffed. "Please, they're just being careful." Hannah met her eyes. "I report directly to Mr. Worth now." The words hit Jennifer like a slap. "No," she said too quickly. "That's not possible." Hannah simply nodded and walked past her. Jennifer stood frozen as people began to stare, really stare, for the first time. Whispers shifted direction. "Did you hear? She's working for Harry now." "Directly? How?" Jennifer's chest tightened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. As Hannah stepped into the executive elevator, now unlocked for her, she felt the doors close softly around her. The floor numbers climbed. With each passing level, she crossed a line no intern was meant to cross. And somewhere above, in an office of glass and steel, Harry Worth stood waiting, unaware that by pulling Hannah into his inner circle, he had just set the stage for something far more dangerous than scandal. Jennifer Wolfe watched the elevator doors close. For the first time since she'd entered Worth Dominion, fear crept into her carefully curated world. She wasn't winning anymore. She was losing control. Did you expect Harry's decision? Smash like if this shocked you. Hannah Max's first day inside Harry Worth's inner circle felt unreal. The executive floor was quieter than the rest of Worth Dominion. Not because fewer people worked there, but because everyone moved with intention. Conversations were measured. Footsteps were soft. Decisions carried weight. Hannah noticed everything. She sat at a sleek desk just outside Harry's office, hands folded neatly, posture relaxed but alert. Her new access badge felt heavier than the old one, not in weight, but in meaning. She was no longer invisible, and that made her dangerous. The first meeting began at precisely 9 o'clock. Senior executives filed into the glass-wall conference room. Men and women with decades of experience, resumes thick with accomplishments. A few glanced at Hannah with polite curiosity. Others barely hid their skepticism. And in turn, here, Harry entered last. As always, the room fell silent. The presentation began. Quarterly projections for a high-risk international expansion. Slides flashed across the screen. Charts, forecasts, risk assessments. Hannah listened quietly, eyes moving between the data and the speakers. Her face revealed nothing. Then the lead analyst made a mistake. It was subtle, a decimal misplaced in a long-term growth projection. The kind of error most people wouldn't notice, except it altered the entire risk profile. Hannah's fingers twitched. She hesitated. Then she spoke. "Excuse me," she said softly. Every head turned. The analyst frowned. "Yes." "The growth rate on slide 14 assumes currency stability," Hannah said evenly. "But your own appendix accounts for a 3-point volatility shift. The margin should be lower." Silence. The analyst stared at the screen, then at his notes. His brow furrowed. He recalculated. Her correction was right. A murmur rippled through the room. Harry said nothing. He watched Hannah closely. The meeting continued. Minutes later, a senior VP referenced a market trend in Europe. Hannah spoke again, this time in flawless French, to clarify a regulatory nuance. The VP blinked, startled. Harry's gaze sharpened. By the end of the meeting, the room felt different, less dismissive, more cautious. Afterward, one executive muttered to another, "Where did they find her?" Hannah returned to her desk, heart steady, mind already moving on. She didn't feel proud. She felt normal. That unsettled Harry more than the corrections themselves. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Hannah caught inefficiencies before they became losses. She anticipated objections before they were voiced. She translated documents on the fly, Mandarin, French, Spanish, without hesitation. She never interrupted unnecessarily, never spoke to impress, never sought attention. She spoke only when it mattered. Harry began calling her into brief strategy sessions, initially on the guise of administrative support. "Sit," he said one evening, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Hannah sat. "What do you think of the Asia-Pacific acquisition?" he asked. Hannah considered the question carefully. "The numbers work," she said, "but the timing doesn't." "Why?" "Because your competitors are watching the same indicators. If you move now, you trigger a bidding war. If you wait 6 months, regulatory pressure forces them to retreat." Harry studied her. "And the risk?" Hannah met his gaze. "Only if you lack liquidity." A pause. Harry leaned back slightly. "We don't." "I know," she replied. Something in his chest shifted. Harry had spent his life surrounded by intelligence, but this was different. This wasn't rehearsed brilliance or academic arrogance. This was instinct, pattern recognition sharpened by discipline. He dismissed her after the meeting, but his mind stayed with her long after she left. That night, long after the building emptied, Harry made a call. "Run a background check," he said quietly. "Full depth." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, she's an intern." "Run it anyway." Days passed. Jennifer Wolfs noticed a change immediately. Hannah no longer pushed a cleaning cart. She walked with purpose. She carried documents executives treated with respect. She entered rooms Jennifer could only observe from outside. Jennifer's irritation grew into something sharper. Suspicion. She cornered an assistant one afternoon. "What exactly does that intern do now?" The assistant hesitated. "She advises." Jennifer laughed sharply. "Advises?" But the laughter didn't reach her eyes. Meanwhile, Harry reviewed the background reports as they arrived. Hannah Mac's financial aid records, employment history, academic transcripts. Too clean, too intentional. Her grades were exceptional, but inconsistent in a way that suggested deliberate restraint. Her employment history showed necessity, not ambition. Her financial records showed discipline beyond her income level. And then there were the gaps. Harry stared at the screen late one night as a familiar name appeared. Mac's Legacy Trust. The file flagged automatically. Harry's eyes narrowed. The Mac's Legacy Trust was a ghost story in corporate circles. A vanished Black American dynasty rumored to have controlled vast assets before disappearing decades ago after a brutal corporate war. Some said they'd been destroyed. Others said they'd gone underground. No confirmed heirs. No public figures. Just whispers. Harry pulled additional records. Charitable donations routed through shell foundations. Strategic investments that quietly influenced markets without ever taking credit. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't coincidence. Harry leaned back slowly, the weight of the realization pressing down on him. Hannah Max wasn't just intelligent. She was trained. Not by a school, not by a company. By something far more deliberate. The next morning, Harry watched Hannah as she organized files at her desk, unaware of what he'd uncovered. She looked the same as always. Calm, focused, grounded. But now, Harry saw layers where others saw simplicity. Questions formed in his mind. Dangerous ones. Why hide her identity? Why place herself at the bottom? Why here? Across the office, Jennifer Wolfs watched too, her nails digging into her palm as she noticed the way executives now defer to Hannah's input. Something was slipping from Jennifer's grasp, and she could feel it. As Harry closed the file on his screen, one truth became impossible to ignore. The intern who carried herself like she had nothing to lose was actually carrying a legacy powerful enough to rival his own. And that changed everything. Do you think Hannah's intelligence is natural or trained? Comment below. Harry Worth had faced hostile takeovers, political pressure, and threats wrapped in smiles. But nothing unsettled him like the file glowing on his private screen at 2:17 a.m. Mac's Legacy Trust. The name pulsed with history. Harry stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office. The city sprawled beneath him like a living circuit board. Lights flickered. Fortunes moved. Empires breathed. He tapped the screen, and the past opened its jaws. 25 years earlier, the Max family had been untouchable. They weren't loud. They weren't flashy. They didn't chase headlines. They controlled infrastructure, ports, logistics, energy corridors, quiet financial arteries that made louder billionaires possible. The patriarch, Elias Max, believed power should never announce itself. While others built towers with their names etched in steel, the Max family built leverage, and that made them dangerous. The war didn't start with violence. It began with lawsuits, regulatory pressure, coordinated media smears. Allies turned silent. Banks withdrew credit overnight. Then came the accidents. A shipping fire ruled an electrical failure, the data center breach blamed on interns, that a private jet forced to land under mysterious circumstances. The message was clear: disappear or be erased. Elias Max saw it before anyone else did, and he made a decision that would rewrite his bloodline. The Max family didn't fight back publicly. They withdrew. Assets were fragmented into trust charities and blind holdings. Ownership dissolved into layers so deep even governments couldn't trace them. The family name was scrubbed from registries, replaced with shell directors and anonymous boards. But the most radical decision was the smallest. Elias's granddaughter, Hannah Max, barely a toddler at the time, would never know wealth, not until she could survive without it. She must learn the world without armor, Elias had said. If she grows up powerful, power will own her. If she grows up ordinary, she'll own herself. So Hannah was raised away from boardrooms and black cars. She grew up with budgets, not balance sheets, jobs, not dividends, consequences, not protection. She learned discipline from scarcity, empathy from struggle, observation from silence. Her education was selective: public schools, financial aid, scholarships earned, not gifted. But behind the scenes, private tutors trained her mind like a blade. Logic, economics, behavioral psychology, languages, strategy, not to dominate, but to understand, not to conquer, but to see. The Max family didn't raise an heiress. They raised a survivor. Harry closed the file slowly. For the first time in his life, the narrative he believed in, merit control, emotional detachment, felt incomplete. He had assumed Hannah Max was impressive despite her background. Now he understood. She was impressive because of it. Everything reframed itself. Her calm during humiliation, her refusal to react emotionally, her precision with words, her instinct to observe before acting. She wasn't intimidated by power because she'd been trained to see past it. Harry exhaled slowly. All his life, he had believed emotional distance was strength. But Hannah's strength had been forged through restraint, not absence, through choice. And that cracked something in him. Later that day, Harry summoned Hannah, not to his office, but to the private observation lounge overlooking the city. She arrived quietly, hands folded, eyes steady. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Harry studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Do you believe people are shaped more by what they're given or what they're denied?" he asked. Hannah didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the skyline, at the wealth, at the distance between towers and streets. "Denied," she said finally. "What you're given can be taken. What you learn to live without becomes permanent." Harry nodded once. He didn't tell her what he knew. Not yet. But in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement without exposure, a shared understanding of restraint. Jennifer Wolfe's sensed a shift like a pressure change before a storm. Harry no longer entertained her calls. Executives stopped laughing at her jokes. Invitations thinned. And Hannah Max, that in turn was everywhere. Jennifer's research team worked overtime. They found nothing. No scandals of NO debts, NO connections, which terrified her. People with nothing to hide always had something hidden. Jennifer stood in front of her mirror that evening, rage tightening her jaw. "If you won't fall quietly," she whispered, "I'll make you fall publicly." She began to plan, not a confrontation, an annihilation. Over the next week, Harry watched Hannah differently. When she reviewed reports, he saw strategy behind simplicity. When she declined credit, he saw discipline, not insecurity. When she moved through spaces without asserting dominance, he saw restraint sharpened by legacy. The man who had never smiled, never needed to, felt something unfamiliar rising. Respect, not admiration. Respect. And that disturbed him more than fear ever had. On Friday evening, Hannah returned to her desk to find a single envelope waiting. No sender. Inside was a printed headline mock-up. Worth Dominion Intern exposed. Fake poverty hidden agenda? Beneath it, a note. You should have stayed invisible. Hannah stared at the paper. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into her bag. No shaking hands, that N.O. racing heart. Only clarity. Across the floor, Jennifer Wolfs watched from behind glass. Lips curved in satisfaction. She believed she was about to end a nuisance. She had no idea she was about to awaken a dynasty. That night, Harry stood alone again in his office. City lights burning below. His phone buzzed. A single message from his security chief. Sir, Jennifer Wolfs has initiated a media release scheduled for Monday morning. Harry closed his eyes briefly. Some wars were fought with money, some with silence, and some with truth. For the first time in his life, Harry Worth didn't plan to remain detached. Would you hide your wealth to build character? Yes or no? Tell us. The emergency board meeting was called at 7 a.m. By 6:40, the 28th floor Worth Dominion was already thick with tension. Executives arrived early, too early, faces tight, voices low. Assistants whispered instead of spoke. Security doubled at every entrance. The glass-walled boardroom, usually a symbol of calm authority, felt like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. At the center of it all sat Jennifer Wolfs, impeccably dressed in white, posture flawless, confidence sharpened to a blade. This was her moment, or so she believed. Jennifer had spent the entire night orchestrating this ambush. Emails sent anonymously to board members. Confidential documents leaked to internal compliance. A carefully constructed narrative. Hannah Max is not who she claims to be. She infiltrated Worth Dominion under false pretenses. She has access to executive data. This is corporate espionage. The words were poison, designed to trigger fear. Fear always worked in boardrooms. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly as the directors filed in. She didn't look at Hannah. That was intentional. Hannah sat at the far end of the table, calm, composed, wearing a simple dark blazer. No jewelry, no signs of nerves, just stillness. That unnerved Jennifer more than anger ever could. The chairman cleared his throat. This emergency session has been convened to address serious allegations regarding internal security, he said. Ms. Wolfs, you requested this meeting. You may begin. Jennifer stood. She didn't rush. She let silence stretch, commanding attention the way she always had. Members of the board, she began smoothly. I regret that it has come to this, but my loyalty to Worth Dominion leaves me no choice. She gestured toward Hannah. This individual entered our company under the guise of poverty and obscurity. Yet evidence suggests she has undisclosed financial backing, unexplained expertise, and suspicious access to strategic data. A few executives shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer continued, voice calm but cutting. In my opinion, this constitutes a serious threat to our corporate integrity. She sat down. Satisfied, the room held its breath. Eyes turned toward Hannah, some with curiosity, some with judgment, some with barely hidden relief that the target wasn't them. Hannah stood, not defensively, but deliberately. With respect, she said evenly, I've followed every protocol. My work speaks for itself. Jennifer scoffed softly. That's exactly what makes this dangerous. Before Hannah could respond, the doors opened. Not quietly, decisively. 5 men and women entered the boardroom in tailored suits, expressions unreadable, movements precise. At their center was a tall black man with silver at his temples, carrying a leather briefcase embossed with a single word, Max. The chairman frowned. And you are? The man placed the briefcase on the table and opened it. My name is David Cole, he said calmly, senior counsel for the Max Legacy Trust. The room froze. Harry Worth, seated at the head of the table, lifted his gaze for the first time. Jennifer's smile faltered, just a fraction. David continued, We are here to address false allegations made against our beneficiary. He nodded once toward Hannah. Folders slid across the table. Financial statements, asset disclosures, valuation reports stamped by global firms. David spoke with surgical precision. The Max Legacy Trust controls diversified holdings across energy, logistics, technology, and sovereign debt instruments. He paused, letting the weight settle. Our conservative valuation places total assets at $640 billion. A sharp inhale rippled through the room. One board member whispered, That's more than... Yes, David said, anticipating the thought. More than Worth Dominion's current market capitalization. Silence collapsed into shock. Jennifer stood abruptly. That's impossible. David turned to her slowly. Ms. Wolfs, your understanding of power is loud. Ours is quiet. He clicked a remote. The screen lit up with charts. Ownership trees. Blind trusts. Historical data tracing back decades. Furthermore, David added, any attempt to frame our beneficiary as a spy will result in immediate litigation against all parties involved for defamation, discrimination, and market manipulation. The word discrimination hung heavy. Several executives avoided Hannah's eyes. Jennifer's allies began to unravel in real time. Phones buzzed. Messages came in, short, urgent. We're out. I can't be associated with this. Good luck. One board member cleared his throat. Ms. Wolfs, were you aware of this? Jennifer opened her mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time, she had no narrative, no leverage, no audience. Harry finally spoke. Cold, clear, controlled. This meeting is adjourned. He stood. Ms. Wolfs, he added, eyes locking onto hers. You are suspended pending investigation. Her knees buckled slightly. Security stepped forward, not aggressively, but unmistakably. Jennifer looked around the room, searching for support. There was none. She had mistaken noise for power, and power had just moved past her. As the room emptied, Hannah gathered her things quietly. David Cole leaned toward her. The trust recommends a public response. Hannah nodded once. I know. Across the room, Harry watched her, not with curiosity now, but with something deeper. Recognition. The boardroom that once terrified executives now felt small. That evening, invitations went out across Manhattan's elite circles. The Worth Dominion Global Charity Gala, media confirmed. Sponsor secured. Press attendance guaranteed. And tucked into the agenda, one line stood out. Strategic Partnership Announcement. Jennifer Wolf sat alone in her penthouse, watching the city burn with lights she no longer controlled. Hannah Mack stood at her window too, calm, composed, ready. Two women, one truth, one stage. And tomorrow, silence would no longer be an option. Should Hannah reveal everything publicly or stay silent? Comment your vote. The Worth Dominion Global Charity Gala was not just an event. It was a battlefield dressed in diamonds. The venue, a historic Manhattan museum wrapped in glass and gold, glowed like a crown jewel against the night sky. Limousines lined the streets. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Billionaires, politicians, royalty-adjacent elites, and legacy families poured in, each one hungry for proximity to power. And tonight, power was watching itself. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors. A live orchestra played softly, elegant and restrained. Every detail screamed money. But more importantly, status. Jennifer Wolfs arrived fashionably late. She wore a silver gown that clung like liquid confidence, hair perfect, smile rehearsed. To the untrained eye, she looked untouched by scandal. But beneath the silk, panic burned. She knew something was coming. She just believed desperately that she could still control how it landed. Jennifer moved through the room like she owned it. She laughed too loudly at familiar faces. She touched arms. She leaned in to whisper rumors, old habits, last weapons. She's just an intern, she murmured to her venture capitalist wife. People love a fake underdog story, she told a reporter softly. Harry doesn't even speak to her, she said with a confident shrug. Each lie was a stitch trying to hold together a dress already unraveling. Across the room, Hannah Max arrived quietly. No entourage. No announcement. She wore a simple black dress, tailored, elegant, powerful in its restraint. Her hair was natural, her posture unshakable. She didn't scan the room for approval. She scanned it like someone who understood systems. Eyes followed her, some curious, some confused, some suddenly nervous. Jennifer noticed. Her smile tightened. The MC stepped onto stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "thank you for joining Worth Dominion in supporting global education and innovation." Applause rippled. Jennifer leaned toward a nearby journalist and said just loud enough to be heard, "It's ironic, really. Some people rise because of charity, others because of deception." The journalist's eyes flicked to Hannah. Jennifer stood, uninvited, unscheduled, bold. "I'd like to say something," she announced, voice ringing through the hall. A hush fell. Harry Worth, standing near the stage, turned slowly. Jennifer smiled at him, soft, intimate, familiar. "Harry," she began, "this company means integrity, transparency, trust, and I think our guests deserve clarity about who represents Worth Dominion tonight." Murmurs spread. Jennifer turned, pointing, not sharply but delicately, toward Hannah. "This woman," she said, "has built a narrative of struggle, of invisibility. But we all know stories can be manufactured." Gasps, whispers, phones subtly lifted. Jennifer's voice grew warmer, more theatrical. "I just think the truth matters." She stepped back, satisfied. The room buzzed. All eyes turned to Hannah. Hannah did not react. She didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. She waited. The orchestra stopped. The MC glanced nervously toward Harry. Harry said nothing. Then, slowly, he raised his hand. The room went silent. "Thank you, Ms. Wolfs," Harry said calmly, "for reminding us why tonight matters." He turned to the MC, proceed with the announcement. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. The MC swallowed and nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen, Worth Dominion is honored to announce a strategic global partnership." The screen behind them lit up. A single emblem appeared. Max Legacy Trust. The room froze. The MC continued, voice trembling with the weight of it. "This partnership represents the largest private philanthropic and economic collaboration in our company's history." Numbers appeared, bigger than anyone expected. Then a name. Hannah Max. Future chairwoman, Max Legacy Trust. The silence shattered. Gasps turned into shockwaves. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed like lightning. Jennifer staggered back as if struck. "No," she whispered. This is a mistake." Hannah stepped forward. Not rushed, not angry, just certain. She took the microphone. "I was raised without privilege," Hannah said calmly. "Not because my family lacked wealth, but because they believed character should come before comfort." The room leaned in. "I cleaned floors here. I listened. I learned. I watched how power treats those it thinks are invisible." Her eyes found Jennifer. "And I learned something important." She paused. "Real power doesn't need to humiliate." Applause erupted. Hesitant at first, then thunderous. Jennifer's world collapsed in real time. Sponsors stepped away from her. Socialites turned their backs. Phones buzzed again, but this time not with loyalty, with distance. "Delete my name from your contacts. We can't be seen together. This is over." Jennifer stood alone in the brightest room in the city, invisible at last. Within minutes, the media narrative flipped. Headlines wrote themselves. Gold digger exposed at Billionaire Gala. Intern revealed his heir to hidden dynasty. Max Trust shakes Wall Street. Jennifer tried to speak. No one listened. She tried to leave. Security politely, but firmly, guided her out. Cameras followed, not with admiration, with fascination. By morning, her sponsors withdrew. Her invitations vanished. Her name became a cautionary tale whispered in elite circles. She had chased power, and power had erased her. Later that night, as the gala wound down, Hannah stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city. Harry approached. No cameras and no audience. Just two people standing at the edge of something irreversible. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," Hannah replied, "but I wanted to." He studied her. All of it, The mop, the silence. Tonight, you never once tried to impress anyone. She smiled faintly. I wasn't here to be chosen. Something shifted in Harry's eyes. For the first time, the world he built on control felt optional. As the city slept, the board convened in secret. Pressure mounted. Whispers spread. She's too powerful, he's compromised. This could destabilize everything. Harry stood at the center of it all. Tomorrow, he would be forced to choose. Between legacy and loyalty. Between power and principle. Between the man he had been and the man he might become. And this time, silence would not be enough. Is this the most satisfying downfall you've seen? Share this story. The boardroom was full again. But this time, fear had changed sides. Morning light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows of Worth Dominion's top floor, washing over the long table where decisions worth billions were made with a nod or destroyed with a glance. Harry Worth stood at the head of the room, silent as always. Around him sat the people who had shaped his life before he could shape his own. Board members, legacy partners, family representatives who spoke in a language of image, risk, and control. They had rehearsed this. They believed this was still their territory. Harry, his uncle began carefully, fingers steepled. What happened last night was dramatic. Another board member followed quickly. The Max Trust partnership is unprecedented, yes, but public perception is volatile. Your closeness to Hannah Max introduces instability. A woman at the far end leaned forward. This isn't personal. It's governance. Harry listened. He always had. But something was different now. You're asking me, Harry said evenly, to distance myself. No one answered directly. They didn't need to. You're asking me to choose, he continued, eyes cold but clear, between the system that made me and the person who exposed it. Silence. Finally, the chairman spoke. We're asking you to protect the empire. Harry nodded once. Then he surprised them all. No, he said. The word landed like a crack in glass. Murmurs erupted. Harry, you're being emotional. This is reckless. Harry raised his hand. The room obeyed. For 28 years, he said, voice steady, I've done everything this empire demanded. I became what fear needed me to be. He paused. And last night, I realized something. They leaned in. This empire does not need my coldness to survive. He straightened. But I needed someone else's courage to wake up. The chairman's face tightened. If you proceed down this path. I will, Harry interrupted calmly. Step down from any role that requires me to betray my principles. Gasps. You'd give up control, someone whispered. Harry looked at them, not angry, not defiant. Free. I already have control, he said. I just never used it for myself. The meeting ended without a vote. Because for the first time they understood, Harry Worth was no longer asking. That night, long after the building emptied, Harry sat alone in the security room. The glow of monitors painted his face in soft blue light. He replayed the footage again. The glass lobby, the spilled coffee, the mop. He'd seen it 100 times already. But now he wasn't watching Jennifer. He was watching Hannah. The way she stood, not aggressive, not submissive. The way her voice didn't shake. The way she chose dignity instead of rage. She hadn't been trying to win. She'd been refusing to be erased. Harry leaned back slowly. Memories surfaced uninvited. Doctors speaking in calm tones. Tutors dismissed after weeks. His parents' worried faces slowly hardening into acceptance. He doesn't respond. He doesn't connect. He doesn't feel the way others do. So the world taught him to replace feeling with function. And he had mastered it, until a woman with nothing but integrity had stood her ground. She wasn't fearless, Harry murmured to the empty room. She was honest. Something tight in his chest loosened. Harry closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't push the feeling away. He let it come. The loneliness he'd mistaken for strength. The silence he'd called discipline. The warmth he'd never learned to name. He realized then he had never smiled because he had never been seen as human, only as an outcome. Hannah hadn't tried to fix him. She hadn't chased him. She hadn't feared him. She had simply existed fully in front of him, and that had reached him. The next evening, Harry found Hannah on the rooftop garden, a quiet place overlooking the city. She stood near the railing, hands resting lightly, watching the lights come alive below. He approached without announcement. "I saw the footage again," he said. Hannah nodded. "I figured. I realized something," he continued. "You didn't scare Jennifer with a mop." She turned to him. "You scared her with certainty." Hannah smiled softly. People who live on appearances are terrified of truth. Harry studied her. "I've lived my entire life being told I was born without something," he said quietly. "That I was incomplete." She didn't interrupt. "But I don't think that's true anymore." The city hummed beneath them. Harry took a slow breath. And then it happened. Not forced, not practiced, not controlled. A small smile formed. Real, unguarded, human. Harry Worth, the man who never smiled since birth, smiled. Hannah froze. For a moment, the world did too. There were no cameras, and no witnesses, and no headlines. Just a man reclaiming something he didn't know he was allowed to have. Hannah's eyes softened. "There it is." Harry exhaled, almost a laugh. "I think," he said, "you scared something out of me too." "What's that?" "The belief that power requires emptiness." In the weeks that followed, the world noticed changes. Harry Worth spoke more, listened longer, led differently. The Max Trust partnership flourished, not as a conquest, but a collaboration. Hannah declined spotlight interviews. She didn't need them. She had already changed what mattered. And somewhere between boardrooms and quiet rooftops, a new truth settled into Worth Dominion's walls. Power bows, not to fear, not to wealth, but to humanity. Legends say Harry Worth built an empire, but those who know the truth say this. A woman with a mop reminded him he was human, and that changed everything. Did this story move you? Subscribe for more billionaire stories that hit deeper than money.